Thank you so much again for making the time for this.
Yeah,
We're
thanks,
so
Naveen.
happy to have you here.
Yeah, well, thanks for coming out this way.
Yeah. Chad, first of all, we go back a long way, so I've
Hmm.
known and followed your journey for a while.
Yeah,
First of all, congratulations on all the success that you've had with Advanced Ionics, and it's been a fair bit of time in the making. So,
hmm,
and you've gone through, literally the beginning stages to now
yep,
being fully up and running
yep,
and doing great things. So today I thought would be a great opportunity for us to just talk about, and a lot of the viewers would love to listen in, learn some of the things that they think can help their own journeys,
hmm, hmm,
and also at the same time talk about how new things are created, especially something which is entrenched and deep in engineering.
yep.
So
Sounds good.
we'd just like to learn about like how did you start the company and why did you start Advanced Ionics in the first place?
Yeah. I'll do a brief version of the story, but people who know me well know that I grew up on a family farm in central North Dakota, so a couple states away from here in Wisconsin, but similar lifestyle overall. And there, I grew up with a real passion for science, for sustainability, for nature, and seeing on the farm how much like fertilizer we use, how much chemical we use, how much fuel. I thought a lot about how do we decarbonize these things, even at an early age in the 90s. And so hydrogen was something people have latched onto at various times. And certainly hydrogen had one of those hype bubbles in the 90s. But it was very fascinating to me because I knew how important it was to make hydrogen was to make ammonia or these other products we used on the farm. So fast forward, I started to look in college at how do I get into the hydrogen field, and I ultimately did a master's degree in electrochemistry, did a master's thesis on platinum catalysts, switched over to the battery field for a while, which was very, very helpful, and then came back to work on hydrogen fuel cells at General Motors. And that was really, really fun work to do. The one thing I saw a real need for, though, was to address the issues for that really are limiting the use of clean and green hydrogen in industrial uses, coming back to ammonia.
Yeah,
And we'll get into the weeds a little bit on that here, I think, as we talk. But that was the reason I ended up starting this company. Then, is we needed new solutions specifically for industrial hydrogen production, um, and that's why we're here today.
that's awesome. Now there's a lot to unpack over there, specifically with hydrogen,
Hmm, hmm.
because just someone looking at the energy sector from outside,
Yeah,
a lot of people are only familiar with either the gas, which is petrol and diesel that they put
yeah,
in their cars,
sure.
or perhaps natural gas in their homes
Yep, yep,
for the
yep,
stove,
yep,
right? And then the whole thing about electric cars,
sure.
and somewhat in hydrogen fuel cell cars, and some might know of this.
Yeah,
But where does this hydrogen aspect sit in the spectrum of all the hydrocarbons in a way?
yeah. Well, to give you a little perspective, my wife and I, we drive two electric cars, one plug-in hybrid and one plug-in.
Okay.
Um, and I I'm very happy with them and have no reason to switch that to something else. So, which gets me to the point of any time you kind of said the key word there, which is energy. And I always shift the conversation back to hydrogen's not an energy source, and it's really not a good energy carrier. It's a feedstock, it's a molecule that you do things with. And most people don't really have any concept of just how much hydrogen is used to make all of these things that we take for granted. So I always go back to the ammonia example is, you know, we wouldn't be able to grow society at the rate we do without abundant crops and livestock and all the food we eat. And
Correct.
that's really fueled by ammonia. the
Okay.
ability to apply fertilizer, and we make ammonia from hydrogen. You go into things like plastics
Right.
that we take for granted, need hydrogen to make many of the monomers that are used to create plastics.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing when you get to very specialized forms of glass or silicon. You need hydrogen for those processes as well. Computer chips use hydrogen in the lithography machine, and you can pretty much go down the list there. So it's really hydrogen as a molecule, as a feedstock, is an integral part of our lives that we don't even realize. And making sure that we create zero carbon hydrogen, meaning producing hydrogen without emissions that come from it,
Mm.
is important to the future decarbonization of everything in society.
That's interesting that you say that. When you use the word decarbonization,
Mhm.
why is then carbon so harmful, or what is the main problem?
Yeah. So I think most people are familiar with the effects of releasing carbon dioxide from your car or from your stove, and what that does both to, the planet Earth itself with global climate change and global warming. Some people call it global weirding too, or weather weirding. Um, Whatever you call it, it's bad. Um, and then the second thing is there's a lot of other byproducts that come from the burning of fossil fuels as well. So you think about your gas stove in your house,
Mm-hmm.
is extremely harmful to your own health and to especially to your children's health. And so that's why it's extremely important to eliminate all sources of carbon emissions, especially ones that are very close to us in our home, such as such as replacing a gas stove with an induction stove, or replacing your gas burning vehicle with an electric vehicle. But you can apply the same thing too with all of these industrial processes as well that go on behind the scenes that people don't realize, but that's 30-40% of all emissions on the planet right there. So we have to decarbonize these processes.
So you said about a couple of things so far. One is like decarbonization.
Mm-hmm.
Then the key aspect that I kind of uh, picked from your conversation is the amount of carbon that is perhaps released or used up
Mm-hmm.
in making something happen, whether it's the stove,
Yep.
but specifically for hydrogen,
Yep.
uh, we because it's like such an abundant element,
Mm-hmm.
and you just recounted of all the things that it's in.
Yeah.
What's the main thesis behind there, and like why is hydrogen so important
Yeah.
in the
So
equation?
so basically, you take methane and combine that with water, and you get hydrogen and carbon dioxide as an output from that reaction. And that really can be replaced by switching to using just pure water.
Okay.
And so that's where electrolysis comes in. And what we do with the devices we make called electrolyzers is you just take water, you provide electricity to the process, and you get hydrogen and oxygen as your only output.
Okay, so it's a better way of creating hydrogen.
Yeah, without any carbon dioxide as a byproduct of that reaction.
Wow. So what you're trying to say, if I'm understanding it right,
Mm-hmm.
Chad, is maybe the output of your process might be great,
Mm-hmm.
but the way you produce it
Mm-hmm.
is also equally important, because what you might end up doing while producing it
Mm-hmm.
might create more damage.
Yes, yes,
And that is why the process is as important as the output.
yes, yes, exactly. So it gets into a little bit about what we think about when we build the machines themselves. So we use materials like stainless steel and nickel, very abundant materials and components from the balance of plant point of view.
Mm,
So when we build our system, it's pipes, it's wires, and then there's our stack, which you could think of almost like a big version of like a battery in your car. It has plates lined up inside of it,
yeah.
and you have something called a stack.
We are talking about electrolysis here.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay, this is
yeah.
101
So
of
yeah,
electrolysis
so
happening right
I'm
here.
trying to make
Chemistry
some
lesson.
analogies, yeah, and hopefully the analogies basically hit. But basically, then we use, you often hear about critical materials used in some things.
What are critical materials?
Things like platinum or iridium or rare earth elements.
Expensive and difficult to find.
Yeah, or they're geopolitically constrained. So that's a big reason why we've developed the technology that we have now, is that we use really abundant materials that are not geopolitically constrained either. So to your point, very good from a supply chain resourcing point of view. And then, of course, um, the big reason what we do is we make very efficient electrolyzers. So
Okay.
we know that clean energy is very precious, whether it comes from nuclear, solar, wind. We want to use as little of that clean energy as possible so we get as much out of it as we can. Meaning we need 30% less solar panels, 30% less wind turbines. And so that's basically what we do here is we've developed electrolyzers that are very efficient, that are specifically suited for industrial hydrogen production. So that's really the great thing about what we're doing.
Wow. That's a big use case
Yeah.
with a big impact over
Yep.
there, right?
Yep. Yeah. Basically, worldwide impact. Hydrogen itself, the byproduct carbon dioxide from doing steam methane reformation is about 3% of all emissions today. So we're here to basically eliminate 3% of all emissions. And then as you go to using hydrogen in other processes, such as in making steel, right now they use coal or coke as the reducing agent to make steel. Now companies are starting to demo hydrogen, and that has some legs with it. So that's another 6% of global emissions. So we believe that there's basically a pie out there of 10% of all emissions that we can directly have a big impact upon. Yeah, right. Eliminating. So.
You said something about the production of steel.
Mhm.
Could you walk us through a little bit about like what
Yeah.
and what impact it creates?
Yeah, so if you're up in Minnesota and you're mining taconite, basically a form of iron ore.
Okay.
So in its simplest sense, you have basically iron. It's in the iron 2 plus or iron 3 plus oxidation state to get into a little chemistry, and then there's some oxygen with it. So you have iron, you have oxygen there. So you have to get that oxygen out. You just want iron left behind. So what do you use?
Pure iron.
Yeah, you want pure iron at the end. And then you do some other processing to make steel from it. So basically, you have to use something like carbon,
right,
which is done now, to grab that oxygen.
Okay.
And then you get carbon dioxide.
Okay.
You don't want that, right?
Yeah.
So then instead you can use hydrogen.
Yeah.
To grab that oxygen, and then you release water as your output. So
okay,
very circular in that sense and very elegant.
And
so.
Literally kind of, if I may use the phrase, changing the equation. Quite literally so, right?
Yeah, it changes the old-fashioned equation to the new one. And you can take that water, that heat, recycle that back into the electrolyzer itself as well. So it's a fully circular process.
So it's again going back to that efficient use of hydrogen, like how hydrogen, one of the most abundant elements, could be used in all these processes.
Yes, exactly. Same thing with making ammonia, where you take nitrogen from the air.
Yeah.
This is how it's done today. So that's not a new process, but you take nitrogen from the air and you combine it with hydrogen and you make NH3, which is ammonia, and that's your fertilizer. So you go down the list then with all the molecules and more complex chemistry that is not my expertise, but we could go into the rabbit hole with the right people, I think.
No, this is fantastic. Even just getting the understanding and how this affects your daily life also is not something that everybody can put together quite literally. So it's good to kind of get a deeper understanding with time from your day and really invest in learning, and hope you're learning with us. I wanted to give a quick shout out to the people who are supporting this. A big shout out to the Milwaukee Tech Hub Coalition. The Milwaukee Tech Hub Coalition is a member-based non-profit which is on a mission to inclusively grow the vibrant tech ecosystem in Southeast Wisconsin. Thank you so much to the Milwaukee Tech Hub Coalition for sponsoring this podcast. understanding with you about these things.
Hmm.
So, how does advanced ionics now coming back fit into all of this
Hmm.
with the electrolyzers, right?
Yeah. So as companies like, let's say, we have a few partnerships, we have a few different investors. So I'll use a few of them as an example. We have BP as one of our investors. We've worked on a project with Repsol. We have some additional announcements coming up as well. These companies are looking at how do they decarbonize their operations, going from the use of fossil fuels, fossil feedstocks to make
Mm,
chemicals, to having outputs that are clean, right? Whether it's clean fuels or clean chemicals or clean plastics, whatever. So they need companies like us to supply that green hydrogen for those processes. So it really dovetails well with where those kind of energy majors, those chemical suppliers want to go. And then you could do that sector by sector. You could say that in the steel sector, you can say that in the fertilizer sector, and there's other smaller ones as well.
that's really cool. Which is the one like vertical you are kind of in a way disrupting with this new equation of yours?
So there's a couple ways to look at that. One is that right now there are a variety of incentives out there
Mm-hmm.
um, in each geography, whether it's U.S., Canada, Europe, Asia, wherever. Even with those incentives in place, uh, you could look at a chart right now, 2024, um, of projects that are being proposed and projects that are making it to final investment decision, FID, meaning
Mm,
meaning it's going to go forward. And it's quite abysmal, actually. It's a very low percentage of proposed green, blue, or whatever clean hydrogen you're talking about going from proposal to FID. And that's a real problem because current technologies
yeah.
just don't cut it. That 30% efficiency advantage is often the what's needed as a tipping point between something not making FID and something making FID. And so that's where we're coming in to really disrupt, where a lot of companies make announcements now saying, yeah, we can't do green hydrogen, it's too expensive, or we need more subsidies, or we need more government handouts.
Right.
That doesn't need to be the case. That's where we come in and disrupt and change the equation. Getting rid of the groupthink that's out there around, oh, well, you have to use alkaline technology or you have to use PEM technology, which exist, or other technologies. We're coming in and saying, no, there's actually a new kid on the block, and we're here to basically offer a better way to do that with our water vapor electrolysis technology. Just one other kind of twist on that too is right now it's often for existing companies a decision between staying with the status quo, which is
Mm.
in startup lingo doing nothing. So when if you ever take like get into startup world and you become an entrepreneur, you learn the customer or you know your competition isn't always X, Y, or Z company. It could be the customer choosing to do nothing.
Exactly. Yeah.
Um, and so that is very true in our industry. The customer may say, well, I have polluting hydrogen now. You know, the pain isn't high enough from a carbon tax or an emission standpoint or whatever for me to change anything. I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing.
Hmm.
If you can go to that customer and say, you can actually use our system and it's going to work really well, and here's all of these advantages to doing it and why it's great to operate, it's going to improve efficiencies, it's reliable, it's durable. Oh yeah, and it pencils out without subsidies, or without policy. That's a winning scenario for them. That isn't going to happen with everybody, but especially for the companies we work with that are very innovative.
Yeah.
That's why they're partnering with us. Otherwise, they wouldn't invest with us. They wouldn't partner with us.
Right.
So we have a really great track record in that sense, and we're
Hmm.
really punching above our weight too, from a partnership standpoint, from a market traction standpoint, even at a very early stage of our company. So
That's amazing. You talked a little bit about startup lingo and,
yeah,
and startups.
yeah,
That's another thing I wanted to talk to you today about. Is a lot of the viewers listening in are
hmm
also aspiring entrepreneurs, or people just wanting to make something cool
yeah,
in the engineering domain.
yeah,
This
yeah,
is not just any startup, but there are some differences. It's
hmm
not
hmm
like a SaaS startup or a small product, but this is involving heavy engineering and electrolysis and
yeah,
complicated. Specifically to those entrepreneurs, what would your like advice be,
hmm
or
hmm
just something that you can share, so
thoughts.
that
Yeah,
yeah, thoughts on.
yeah. I'd almost kind of like looking at the flip side of it. When when I first started this process, I looked and you read as much as you can, and you see a lot of books and other articles of somebody who's done something in the SaaS or cloud or software related field. And you're always like sitting there like, well, how does this translate to like deep tech, clean tech, hardware
Hmm.
centric?
Yeah.
And that was always tough. There is a little more out there these days for material, but you kind of have to go to a little more effort to find it and find like stuff that's very relevant, because you get into a lot of things where you have to build out a lot of deep project management expertise, a lot of operational expertise, even at a small side. You also have to be very savvy about combining engineering with deep fundamental material science,
Hmm.
and it's extremely complex. One of our advisors saying it's always very hard to schedule an invention, um, because you're often putting yourself in that position where you're like, okay, well, we need to hit certain milestones by a certain amount of time,
Right.
and you can't let that slip too much, or you run out of money. But you also are doing a lot of little projects where you're inventing little things here and there, and scheduling when those happen is near impossible.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of little kind of tricks that you can apply, that especially this is why it's very useful to have good advisors, even if they're more of a corporate background, especially if they've been in innovative translational R&D, they can be
Right.
very helpful there. So that's kind of
Hmm.
slowly getting around to my main point. There is advisors and a strong network is probably one of the most important things we did, is both from an investor point of view, but also like getting the expertise you need to train your team
Yeah.
as well, because inevitably you're finding other people who are very passionate about what you're doing, um, which also kind of comes with it. Often a lot of them might be not as knowledgeable about the
Hmm.
area you're in, so you have to teach them, you have to train them. People who have a strong background in that stuff can be very valuable to training process, project, operational excellence, translational R&D, application engineering, to those type of people who've come into your company.
Yeah.
So
So if I were to just summarize that in a very simple way, would it be like you read a lot of books and talked to a lot of smart people?
that definitely always helps. I wish I had more time to keep reading. It's something I kind of beat myself up about. So making time for yourself to keep learning. Um,
Any book recommendations?
well, I like the one by the Nest co-founder Tony Fadell, Build. I'm still halfway through that, and there's a few others. I'm all like a chapter or two into, and I'm, like I say, really beating myself up that I haven't gotten through them
The
yet.
but Bill, you said, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
that's one I'm enjoying. Just because he just says it's not as necessarily as structured as some of the other books you read, but I really like it. It's a lot of like very sage advice by someone who's just done it.
No,
You know,
that's amazing,
uh,
and thanks for sharing about that. One key thing that just to dive a little bit deep into your own journey,
mm-hmm,
one of the things I found difficult is even um, just getting started is a
mm-hmm.
little bit difficult,
Yeah, very,
and
very.
especially with like a hardware product,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
you can't really bootstrap
mm-hmm.
certain things like you can do perhaps with a software or
Yeah,
some other things. especially if I were to talk about certain mishaps that have happened with
Hmm. Hmm.
Ocean Gate, or
Hmm.
building these but innovating and bootstrapping, it
Yeah.
doesn't work in hardware.
Yeah. Yeah.
So because you started out and were able to overcome that real difficult hump, like when you're really at the start, how do you even get started with like electrolysis?
Yeah. Um, it's a case by case basis. So for myself, myself and then Bill, my partner, we found a space here, and that's what brought me to Milwaukee, where we could develop early prototypes and kind of work out some of the fundamental science in a space that was free for a while and then very cheap. So we did that through what at the time
Yeah,
was called the Workbench Labs Accelerator. So luckily these days there's more of these
yeah,
accelerator programs and especially workshop spaces where you can go and use them. So
yeah,
I did bootstrap the company for a good amount of time. I had to have built up a little bit of money at prior jobs to do that,
right,
and
right.
that's very challenging for a good number of founders, especially early career founders. They may not have built up
That cushion.
that amount, and
Yeah,
even then, like honestly, it's never enough. So you have to find ways to support that. A lot of people do say grants. A problem we had is we were quite out of the box
okay.
for grants, that people who would review grants were just, they didn't even know how to like conceptualize what we were doing.
Or evaluate you.
Yeah, because a lot of the people who review grants, they might come from the PEM field or solid oxide. So there's like two
PEM.
type PEM, proton exchange membrane. So those are
Okay.
like two types of technologies that exist in our field. So they're going to have a very much an implicit bias or even an explicit bias towards those technologies. So you get into
Correct.
groupthink.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, and so and especially we also were not a university spin out. So universities these days generally have good ways to actually incubate their technologies,
Correct.
spin them out.
Mm.
So this was very, very, very hard for us to get non-dilutive capital to even prove the technology. So that's where, some of it was just luck, where we basically fueled the company early on with private capital. So first bootstrapping, then private capital, and then eventually we did get some RPE funding as
Which
well.
is,
So RPE, Advanced Research Projects
yeah.
Administration, fantastic program. They have a mandate that is a little bit, um, I mean, my personal opinion, it's just a lot more, they have a lot more leeway to invest in concepts that are not falling into traditional categories.
Mm.
And this is why I think RPE is probably the most impactful granting agency that there is in the government, for this reason. And so we did get grant funding from them eventually, but we had already started to prove the concept at that point. So
Wow.
I don't recommend people necessarily go down the path I went down, because it's very painful, and actually the chances of success are quite low,
Okay.
quite low. But it is possible. And so, kind of getting back to what people can do is, one, accelerators, incubators, the ability to get your hands on workshops to do these things. There are more programs now
Yeah.
in the U.S. Activate is a very, very good program. I have many friends who do Activate, and there's others as well too.
That's
So,
fantastic, and congratulations again on like overcoming those hurdles,
mhm,
because the percentage of people and companies who actually do that,
mhm,
especially from the start in the hardware or engineering manufacturing sector in a way,
yeah,
is very low and rare.
yeah,
So obviously congrats. I wanted to also just dive a little bit about, you said you moved to Milwaukee and like
mhm,
that was kind of helpful. So
yeah.
are there any like specifics in terms of why this ecosystem kind of helped you? Was it I know you mentioned the cost. Is it
Mhm.
just the cost of living, or it's more so just the whole ecosystem?
Yeah. So, I'm very much born and bred Midwest, being from North Dakota. And of course, when I worked at General Motors, I was in Detroit area, and I really loved the really blue collar ethos
Mm-hmm.
of the Detroit area. I just loved everything about being there. And so there's probably a certain part of me that when I drove into Milwaukee the first time, I wanted to love it, and I did, for the same reasons I love Detroit as well. Um, Even though there's a couple subtle differences here and there, I think there's a lot of similarities. And then, yeah, you start to check the boxes off, right? Is the cost of living is very, very good here. The ability to find technical talent is quite good. There was the workshop space, the accelerator program, which was very effective at providing us a space to do this type of work. And then the work life balance. Of course, work life balance doesn't really exist in a startup, but nonetheless, it's something that's very important to the people you hire as well. And
Correct.
I
Yeah.
love living here. Great to get to the airport quickly.
No
Love
traffic.
going to the lake. I love
Yeah.
the summertime activities here. It's just a fantastic food and beverage scene, in all shapes and forms. So I just love being here. So yeah, it fits.
That's awesome, and we love having you here.
Yeah, indeed, indeed. And it goes to speak that there's now really a burgeoning, I think, startup community here as well, and has really been an incredible grassroots efforts by by friends of ours and people in the community.
Yeah.
You know, both before I moved here, I think COVID really took the wind out of the sails for a little while, but then it really got going again.
Yeah.
And so it's exciting. You know, I've been in a few cities where I've been part of things that are at the beginning, and I love that. And I felt that way about the founders community here, entrepreneurship in Wisconsin, and in the Midwest in general. So
That is fantastic. On that note, I just wanted to again thank you for
thank you.
being
Yeah.
here. It's always a pleasure meeting you just in general. I hope that we get an opportunity to sit down again and as we follow your journey in general and with Advanced Ionics, that we continue to see more success from you and what great impact you are able to create
Yeah.
for actually the whole globe, to be very honest, with the kind of problem statement that you're working on. So
Yeah. Thanks.
thank you so much, Shad.
Yeah.
Always a pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for having me.
All right.
All right.
That's it.
Yeah.
This podcast is brought to you by the Milwaukee Tech Hub Coalition. The Milwaukee Tech Hub Coalition is a member based nonprofit on a mission to inclusively grow the vibrant tech ecosystem in southeast Wisconsin. They help drive innovation by creating catalytic connections. From their tech focused job boards, events calendars, and monthly meetup groups, there are countless ways to plug into the tech ecosystem. Milwaukee's vibrant urban living, thriving food and art scene, and downtown views of Lake Michigan offer the benefits of a big city but with the prices of a small one. If you want to build your tech career in Milwaukee, get connected to choosemketech.org. Thank you so much for listening to this, and a huge shout out to the Milwaukee Tech Hub Coalition for supporting this podcast.